meeting people virtually, like via a Zoom, that maybe leads to meeting someone in person, or maybe meeting them in person, and that makes a better interview when you interview them, or maybe interviewing them live. Welcome everyone to another edition of the Coach U Show, where we interview experts that share how they do what they do step by step. Today, we have the person I consider to be the Larry King of interviewing executives. Michael Krigsman runs the CXOTalk podcast, and he's interviewed 800 business leaders.
Sorry, you said CSO.
A CXO.
Yeah, sorry.
X is in CFO, CEO, CTO, X is in all these other chief level officers. And what's really impressed me about Michael is that he has such poise in interviewing. Can you imagine like interviewing the CMO of a multi-billion-dollar company and not being afraid and having, questions prepared the right way? I know all of us, we deal with stage fright. We deal with, the imposter syndrome of being able to build networks in the way that Michael has. He's also super meticulous. So go check out his podcasts and see how he's doing his video. Check out his audio. Check out how he does his editing. I have never seen anybody be able to produce podcasts at this level. And that's because he's so meticulous with his team and his processes. So there's no one better to be able to learn from example than Michael Krigsman here. And I'm so honored that you're here on our podcast.
Well, Coach U, I'm the one who is honored. I have been such a fan of yours for many years, and I can't believe that introduction. And I will say, I get nervous every time. I get nervous every single interview without exception.
So a lot of you guys are starting your podcast. You've interviewed a few people, and you might think, how do I ever get to these A-list people that Michael has? So if we just look at the people that he's been interviewing, it is the who's who. And when I look at B2B marketing, there is no one who has a stronger podcast than I think than you, because of the companies that you have involved. So those of you guys, listen to what Michael has to say so that you know how to bring on the right guests, how to extract the best thing, the best information out of them, and to be able to grow your brand. Not because you're talking about yourself, but because you're a really good listener. So Michael, how do you prepare for a podcast when you're about to meet someone important? Walk us through what your process is.
The important thing is to recognize going in that when you interview somebody, it must be genuinely about them. It's not about you. It's not about you as the interviewer and showing all of your greatness. You have greatness, but it's not the place. So that you begin with the guest. And so that means researching the guest. What have they published? Have they written articles? Have they appeared on other podcasts? Have they been interviewed in the press? Have they released videos? Have they released TikToks? Whatever you can get your hands on, immerse yourself in the guest and their world. And really, that's the starting point.
What's been the most challenging guest you've interviewed, or who?
Oh, that's a hard question.
You don't have to say their name.
The hardest guests are the ones who think that it's about them. Now, I just said it is about them. And from our point of view as the interviewer, yes, it's about them, but really, 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 it must be for the benefit of the audience. And so when you interview folks who are a walking, talking brochure, and they just want to describe either their personal greatness, I'm great because I've done this and I've done this, without giving you advice or sharing insight into the challenges or how they went about doing it, or they're a walking brochure, my company does this, that, the other thing, that's not very interesting. It's pretty much useless for the audience. Doesn't matter who the guest is, if they approach it that way. And it's tough for you as an interviewer to deal with that.
A lot of these executives, they're coached by their PR company to give sound bites and give their canned kind of responses. How do you get them out of that zone and into a more authentic, fun conversation?
That's a really good question. And, I work with PR agencies all the time. That's one of the sources of interviewees. They want their clients to appear as a guest on CXOTalk. And many of the people that I interview are media trained. And especially for the ones who are senior execs at public companies, they do have to be careful. They have a genuine need to be careful in what they say because they don't want to affect their stock price in a negative way by potentially saying the wrong thing. So your question of how to get them to open up and be authentic is a very, very important. It's a very fundamental question. So first thing that I do regarding this is I try to make the guest feel comfortable. And CXOTalk is live. So there are people watching and you can't take it back. There's no do-overs when it's live. So the first thing is I try to make them comfortable so that they feel safe, that I have their back. I'm not there to, catch them off guard in some horrible way and make them spill things they don't want to spill. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to learn from their insight, their experience, their wisdom, their expertise. So that's number one. They need to feel comfortable. Number two is when somebody is really stuck on that PR talk track, as you're doing the interview, you need to be thinking, how can I ask the question in a different way, an unexpected way that doesn't map to their preparation, which will then force them to think and be spontaneous in their creativity and their thinking. And all of these kind of folks, these senior level folks from large organizations, these are all very smart women and very smart men. They know how to do this. And then finally, you really need to develop a certain kind of empathy or intuition about where the guest's comfort zone lies. And you can push the boundaries of their comfort zone and they'll go there with you. But if they get the feeling that you're trying to trap them or you have a hidden agenda, they'll just close up tight. There's no simple answer, but that's the kind of constellation of items.
Making them feel comfortable, having the knowledge, guiding them down a path that's slightly outside of what they're already doing. So of the 800 plus sessions you've had with C-level executives, I see the most popular ones, Ziff Davis, almost 300,000 views just on YouTube alone. You see Siemens, McKinsey, wow, NVIDIA. What is it that causes some of these episodes to do better than others? What are you looking for? How do you know when a particular episode is going to take off?
I think that it's, I'm hesitating because you're sort of asking the eternal question, right? How do you know what's going to be a hit?
Yeah.
And it's really tough. I mean, let me just give you an example. I interviewed the chief technology officer of NVIDIA, and NVIDIA then had an announcement a few months after I interviewed him, and the views on that video just skyrocketed because YouTube, this was a good video about him and that topic. And so YouTube started recommending it to people and the views just took off. So I think I always fall back on a few different things. Number one, what's worked in the past. So when I'm choosing topics, I regularly go back and look at our YouTube analytics to figure out what has been successful. Okay, what's had the most number of views? But views is only really, when it comes to video, a part of the equation. What you really need to look at are metrics like the average view duration. So for example, if 10,000 people watch a video, how much time did they actually spend? Did they spend 30 seconds watching? And so YouTube ranks it as a view, or did they spend 10, 15 minutes watching? So that's the second piece, is the average view duration. Then you want to look at what percentage of the viewers watched the full video. So if I have a 45-minute video and 10,000 people watched, out of that 10,000, how many spent the time to sit there for 45 minutes? Okay. That's a really good metric of engagement. And then finally, you add that all up, and what's the total number of minutes viewed? So this is a very kind of, you said I'm meticulous. I'm really meticulous. And this is a very meticulous way of evaluating success on a video, and therefore trying to go back and figure out, this worked in the past, so what may work in the future? And that's in terms of topic. I mean, there's a bunch of other things I could get into, but that's sort of the meticulous but superficial answer, beginning start of the answer.
Are there particular metrics you're looking for in completion time and average view time?
Let's see. For a 45-minute video, it's become really hard. It's become way more competitive. When I started doing this, it's almost 10 years now. There were just far fewer people. So the pandemic accelerated so many things, including competition for people doing full-length, long interviews. So if I get a video that has a 20-minute average view duration, so let's say 20,000 people watch, and the average view duration is 20 minutes or 22 minutes, that used to be fairly commonplace. If I get a 22-minute video now for 10, 20,000 people, that's really good. On shorter videos, it's much easier. On shorter videos, so a rule of thumb might be, in my experience, for my kind of content, your kind of content is going to be different, but for my kind of content, a rule of thumb is you can get a third to a half on a 45-minute video of B2B interview style. If you get an average view duration of 50%, you're doing really, really well. And very few people will be able to do that on a regular basis. It's very hard to do that on a regular basis. For a shorter video, that's 15 to 18 minutes, something in that area, then you really, really want to get above 50% average view duration. If you're below 50%, meaning, let's say you have a 20-minute video, if people aren't watching for 10 minutes, then for us, that's pretty poor. And if you get a video where people are watching for 3 minutes, you need to rethink something, your topic, your approach, your technical production, how you edit and construct the video. We haven't spoken about any of those pieces, but those are a rough idea of some metrics.
So you are using YouTube, I think, is your main channel. You have 4.8 million views on your main channel, but you also distribute through other platforms as well. How do you think about the relationship between the different outlets and how you put effort between them?
Gee, Dennis, you really are asking me the tough questions today. That's another one of these, this is sort of the equivalent of, it's the modern day equivalent of, I'm going to make you a star, right? How do I do it? I know how to make the hits. It's a constant evolution of trying to figure it out and experimenting. And I wish I had clear-cut answer for this. Where does TikTok fit? We've been creating videos that I want to use on TikTok. We're not on TikTok yet, which I think, frankly, is a mistake for us because everybody should be on TikTok. We put clips on social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, sometimes on Facebook. I really think at the end of the day, it's best not to think about this stuff in terms of a magic bullet or a magic formula. It's best, at least, there are some people who just know how to make the hits, right? Like the Beatles, they knew how to make the hits. I'm not the Beatles. So for us mere mortals, us ordinary mortals, it's best not to rely on flashes of genius, even though we may have that sometimes. It's best to rely on a considered process-driven strategy. And so for us, that means consistency of how we promote the videos, creating the types of graphics that we create, being very careful about the editing. We spend a long time with the first 20 seconds of every single video, a long time, a lot, with the technical production, all aspects of it. And I think you add all of that up and it creates a certain amount of consistency over time. And so that's for those of us who are not mad geniuses, like the Beatles or like Elon Musk, just figuring out how to do it and sticking to it, I think, is the winning formula.
I was so engrossed in your answer that I forgot the next question I was going to ask. Have you ever been in that situation where you have a list of questions, but then the guest engrosses you and you lose track and you forget what question you want to ask next? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a really good, I'm laughing because I'm thinking back to those times where, your mind just goes blank. So in our case, we take live questions from the audience. And so those are queuing up during the show. So while I'm interviewing somebody, I'm tweeting and I'm monitoring LinkedIn and I'm monitoring Twitter for questions, and I'm tweeting and, putting out posts on LinkedIn. So the first thing is, when I just am not sure, is I see if there's a good audience question. And if there's no good audience question, then I always have a list of questions that are prepared. I never go into it just blindly. I have topics and I have questions. We may deviate from that a lot, but I go into it very well prepared. So I'll go down my list. But then, so let me make it now worse, okay? I'm interviewing the guest and having some technical issue. So I'm dealing with that. The guest is talking. I'm not paying attention to the guest at all. I don't know what they're talking about, because I'm just trying to put my finger in the dike. Every place the dike is sprung a leak, right? I'm trying to put my finger in there, and my fingers, are all stuck in the dike now. And that's my focus. So the podcast can just go on in front of this live audience. And my mind goes blank, and I don't have a good question. And what you do, you kind of muddle through, you stammer out something. There have been times I've asked the same question again by mistake, or the guest answers something and I asked a question that is basically totally redundant with the guest explaining, I don't know, what they do in their role. And then I'll say to them, so tell us about your role. What are you going to do? It happens.
Michael, how do you balance between queuing up for the next question and trying to think ahead versus listening intently to what the guest is saying? I've never heard anyone ask this question or answer this question before, but it's something that I've struggled with. So I figure you would know, because when I'm listening to a guest, I'm thinking, you know what, I just want to 100% listen to what they're saying, instead of trying to think ahead about what's that next question I can ask, maybe based on what they're saying right now, or where I'm trying to lead the podcast. How do you balance between that?
Oh, well, welcome to my world, Coach Hugh, because while I'm interviewing the guests, as I said before, I'm also monitoring social media, and I'm tweeting, and we have a broadcast setup. It's not just Zoom. I mean, literally it's like a full-blown broadcast setup here. So it's very complicated. And I think the answer to that is twofold. Number one is the preparation. So you go into it with your questions and knowing what it is that you need to talk about. Number two is part of your preparation. It's not just the questions, but it's also the flow, because you are telling a story. You're telling a narrative. Whether you think you are or you're not, there is going to be a flow. And the more you can shape that flow in an intentional way, the better the result. So knowing the questions, knowing the flow, and then trying to key into, and this I think takes experience, trying to key into what are the highlights that the guest has spoken about, right? So the guest has just described something. As the guest is talking, I think it's important to be thinking about what's the key, what strikes you. And like Dennis, you've done that during our conversation, right? Because I've said certain things and then you've keyed off on that. And so as I was talking, somewhere you made a mental note. It may have been intuitive. You weren't even aware of it, but somewhere you made a cognition that a point I made resonated with you for whatever reason. And then you responded back. And so I think that's the essential skill. That's the essential real-time skill, is right there.
It's like this amazing ADD of multitasking. Another question for you. So you and I have gone deep on technical production, and I'm amazed at how far you've gone, where you have production. Most people, they just turn on their webcam. A lot of people, because of social media, a lot of young adults are saying that production quality is only 10% of it, and 90% of it's the content itself. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I understand that point of view. Totally. And there's no doubt about it but there's a trick answer here. So bear with me for just a moment. There's no doubt that those folks are 100% correct. Content is king. If you don't have a good interview, then who cares that it looks great? But of course, there's a but. And the but is there are a million people doing what you're doing, especially post-pandemic. When I started doing this, it was much harder to do this well, just from a production standpoint. And there was much less competition, like I said before. Now you use Zoom, man, you're an interviewer. So the question then is, how do you differentiate yourself? it became very clear to me years ago that practically when we started, that the tools, namely tools like Zoom, which didn't exist at that time, that the tools would become easier and easier and easier to use, making it's like desktop publishing for people who are old. The typesetting industry went out of business because desktop publishing came in and it was easy and it looked good enough. Anyway, it became clear to me that the tools were going to become so easy that this kind of interview would be accessible to anybody, anytime, and with no training and no expertise. And so I said, okay, I need to be the best. For me to succeed and do what I want to do, and being the best means, and here's the big but, being the best, and I mean the best, means no stone unturned. That means from a content standpoint, preparing, choosing the right guests, the right topic, move on down the list to, from a technical production standpoint, do it as close to CNN as possible. And that's my goal.
So high quality content and the perception of high quality content. But I wonder, Michael, because you're interviewing C-level executives at huge companies, there's an even higher expectation of high production quality.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, again, in my specific case where I'm interviewing top execs from the largest companies, these people get requests to be interviewed constantly, all the time, and they turn them down. And before many of my guests come on CXOTalk, their internal PR folks or their comms folks need to evaluate it. And so believe me, I am poked and prodded and kicked and thrown to the ground and kicked and x-rayed all the time by PR folks and comms folks. And the things they look at are the content first, but then the entire package, right? It's a quality deal. We want to be associated with that. You know, one of the most unique things about CXOTalk, one of the most unique things is we have the privilege of using all these companies' logos on our website. For anybody that's ever done business with a large company, one of the contract terms pretty much always says you can't use our logo without our written agreement ahead of time. Look at this. Look at CXOTalk.com, how many logos we have. And nobody complains. They give us, you know, when we sign them up, we say, okay, send us the guest bio, send us a photo, send us your logo. And we need, you know, the white version and the transparent version if you have. And they do all of that. It's because they trust us. And trust is, you asked earlier, Dennis, how do you get the guest to open up and not fall back on just PR brochure stuff, which nobody's interested in. I'm not. The guest, the audience certainly isn't. It's trust and the quality, the production values. We really, you know, we're meticulous. We're really careful about everything, and it develops a sense of trust. And so, to those folks who say that it doesn't matter, totally depends on your audience. If you're interviewing your friend, doesn't matter. If you're interviewing somebody that's hard to get, how are you going to get them to trust you? Because that's what it comes down to.
Amen. And then that combined with the guests that you've already had. So when you first reached out to me to be on CXOTalk, I'm like, who's this Michael Krigsman guy? And then I saw all the executives that you interviewed, and that caused me to think, oh crap, I really, really need to prepare because this is a great opportunity to be on his show. This is the kind of thing this could make someone's career by being on your show.
Well, I don't know.
If you're already an executive, then, you know, fine. But for someone who's maybe not a big deal yet, you could be like the Robert Scoble in the B2B space. Yeah,
no, that is true. And I do like identifying young talent of people who are just doing something extraordinary. We have a show coming up. I mean, just to give you an example, I saw some TikTok videos of a guy who's brilliantly explaining ChatGPT, and he taught me a lot through his TikTok videos. And so I invited him to be a guest. He's coming up in late in January. So it's not on our site yet. So I invited him to be a guest, and he's a young guy. I don't know. He's, you know, in his 20s, early 20s, I guess. Anyway, really talented guy. So I like showcasing people like that. It's, you know, I guess the real question is like, how do you get the guests, right? Is that really kind of the question?
Yeah. Well, it's easy for you to do that now that you have all these names here. It builds this sort of avalanche snowball of trust. But what about people where they don't have the connections or the names that have been on your podcast already?
The first thing is you have to have a plan that I know, Dennis, you're very process driven. So being able to go to a guest and say, I want you to be on this podcast. Here's what it's going to be about. I'm going to prepare questions for you in advance, send them to you so you'll know what we're going to talk about. And if you want me to change anything, I'll do that. The way we're going to do this is to use Zoom. I have a very nice setup so it looks good, and that means that you will be presented well, on and on and on. So step number one is to be able to convey that you are a serious person that they can take seriously. And then, Dennis, to your point, that they, the potential guest, can trust. That's number one. Start there. So now you've got that. Okay, great. How do you find people? You need to look for people who are a little bit out of reach. So for example, don't start trying to get the CEO of Coca-Cola if you've never done this before. You're not going to get that person. But maybe you can get a marketing manager from a mid-sized company. That's a great place to start. Those people don't have that as many outlets. There's more of them. There are many more of them. So if marketing manager from a mid-sized company A doesn't want to do it, then you go to a different department in the same company and you ask, marketing manager B, C, D, and then you go to the next company. And I would just reach out to those folks. And you have to be thoughtful about how you're going to do this, right? Who your target is. But I would go to LinkedIn and I would reach out to those people and I'd say, I'm starting a new podcast. The topic is blank. We're doing this very carefully, very thoroughly. We'll present you well. And would you consider being a guest? We would love to promote your work. We'd love to tell the world about what you're doing. Dennis, it's exactly your strategy. You invite all these people, you're inviting me, which I'm so honored to be a guest, and you're going to promote me, and you told me that, and that's what I tell my potential guests, right? The same thing.
That's my secret. I just elevate really awesome people so I don't have to carry it. That's what a great podcast is.
That's my secret too. That's what I do also.
So you have this well-established podcast. You've got amazing names. You've got an incredible reputation. Everyone in B2B that I've talked to mentions your name as the gold standard of podcasting, not just from your production quality, but everything else all the way down the line. You talked about how you look at your analytics and what's going to hit and evaluating the podcast from a technical standpoint and analytics standpoint. But how about from a business standpoint, Michael? How do you look at the ROI of this podcast? What does it do for your brand, for your business, for sponsors? From a business, like the business of podcasting, how do you look at that?
Well, of course, from a personal brand standpoint, it's a great thing. It's, it establishes trust and credibility. I think for most people, the podcast itself is not going to be a source of income unless you have a huge audience, way huger than I will ever be able to get with a B2B podcast aimed at very senior executives. Unless you have an enormous audience, you will never be able to sustain yourself with the income that comes off of YouTube, for example. So you have to be realistic. So I think for most people, it will be the podcast is a way of establishing connections. Like I have a great Rolodex, I have to tell you. Yeah. So it establishes credibility for you. It builds your network. It gets you out there. So it's great for your social media presence. And if you think strategically, so think about the business model, think strategically about it. So for example, you might want to interview people that could be your potential customers and just get to know them. It's a great way to getting to know somebody, interviewing them on a podcast, and then you follow up. Say, hey, just stay in touch with them and build that relationship. So I think the main takeaway here is for most people, the business model is not the podcast. The podcast is something that supports your brand, your company brand, and your personal brand, and helps you build a network.
Build your network, build your authority. Amazing.
Totally.
If you had to choose between having a podcast versus a New York Times best-selling book, which would you choose?
I would probably go for the best-selling book first, Because if you have the best-selling book, it's going to lead to being interviewed on podcasts. And then it's easy enough to start your own pod. If you have if the New York Times best-selling book, you can pretty much write your own ticket, whatever you want to do.
And they reinforce each other with the speaking and podcasting and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, totally.
There's a question I've been dying to ask you. We talked about it last time. What happens when you have an a-hole on your podcast?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Especially in front of a live audience. It's easy when it's pre-recorded because you can just edit stuff out. You can be very attentive in the editing. When you have a live audience and the person is just drumming up their own ego and their own brand, which, like I said before, is just useless. It doesn't matter how successful somebody is. If it's just them using your platform to expand their own ego, nobody cares. It's just a black hole of noise. So it's a tough balance because on the one hand, you have to take the high road. You can't say to the guest, listen, shut up. You can't, right? I mean, you can't do that as much as you might want to. So you have to kind of gently wedge your way in. I mean, I can tell you a few stories. I won't tell you who it is, but I once had a famous angel investor, a very famous one, actually. And he was a guest and he was just talking about how great he was without providing any meaningful information. Probably one of my worst episodes. And I tried to push him, but he's a strong entrepreneur. He would not let me. I never share that episode. I never tell people about it. We left it on the site, but what are you going to do? If the person's actively fighting you in front of a live audience, I mean, you can't be rude. You can never be rude. I had another journalist this is a weird one. He would not let me ask questions. He just was like motor mouthing about whatever he wanted to talk about. And when I would try to jump in, he would like actively fight me to like stop me from asking questions. It's really weird. And at the end, this is kind of a funny story. So at the very end, like literally just as we were about to finish up, his audio cut out. And I was thinking to myself, I bet he thinks that I did it deliberately. But I didn't. It was a technical thing. And then his audio magically came back. And I am sure to this day that he thinks that I cut his audio off. And believe me, it had occurred to me to do that. So maybe the audio was like channeling my mental waves. I don't know.
Well, Mike, it's been an honor interviewing the podcaster who's the podcaster. It's like asking Michael Jordan about how to play basketball. I mean, how do you top someone like that? But I wanted to ask you, of all the interviews that you've done, is there a question you wish that people have asked you?
Nobody asks me why I really do it. I mean, yes, there's all of these reasons. We just write, credibility, all of this stuff. But I don't know. I just think but I love doing it. I inherently love the opportunity to sit down with these people. I feel like I'm providing something that is worthwhile. And I know I'm very well aware of the flaws in what I do, how I do it, where I want to go, the limitations, the strengths, and the weaknesses. But despite all of that and all of the flaws, and believe me, I see the flaws more than anybody else, there's something inherently just great about being able to interview with these people. And a friend of mine once said that in life, it's all free time. People, we always say, oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. It's all free time. And I choose to spend my free time, which is most of my time, on CXOTalk. When I say my free time, it's most of my time because that's what I do. It's like, this is my focus and work right now. And I just find it inherently like a great thing to do and a good thing to do.
And I'm so glad that in your free time, you decided it was worthwhile to spend it with me. Of all the people that you could spend your time with, I remember we had dinner in Boston. That was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. How do you, I'd love to peek inside your head and understand, how do you think about like meeting people virtually, like via a Zoom, that maybe leads to meeting someone in person, or maybe meeting them in person and that makes a better interview when you interview them, or maybe interviewing them live, like at a conference? How do you balance these kinds of virtual versus real relationships, and how do they reinforce each other in your mind?
You're asking such great questions. I used to travel before the pandemic. I traveled quite a lot. I know you travel an enormous amount. You travel more than I ever did. And these days, I don't travel unless there's a really specific reason to do it. And I'm not recommending this to anybody, by the way. This is just my personal preference. So I'm very comfortable doing things virtually. Of course, there's no substitute for going out and pressing the flesh and spending quality time with people. But I think we're all have become much more comfortable with Zoom, with virtual meetings. And we've all learned intuitively to construct a mapping between, we could say, the two-dimensional version of interacting and map it in our brains to a three-dimensional relationship, the kind of relationship that happens meeting in person. I think the key, though, is in whether it's virtual or in person, the key is follow-up. I do a poor job of it, of following up and maintaining relationships, because I feel like I'm being hit all the time. I'm pitched for people with CXOTalk like endlessly, and I have like this cadence of shows and all this stuff. So I'm weak at that. And it's something I keep telling myself I need to be stronger in. So it's the follow-up that maintains the relationship, whether it's virtual or in person. And I think that's actually the key.
How do you then balance between so many different relationships where you're reacting to all the people that want to be on your show because you're a big deal versus proactively deciding, where do I want to spend my time? You don't have enough time to talk to everybody, which is something we face, but people in your situation have that problem magnified. How do you balance all of that?
It's tough because I don't like saying no. I really don't. I don't like, people will take it. I'll say no, they'll pitch me, and a PR person will pitch me, or somebody will pitch me on their own behalf. And I don't think it's a good fit for whatever reason it might be. And it may not have anything to do with them. They may be great at what they do, but I have a very, very specific criteria for who I want to be a guest on CXOTalk and what I want to talk about. It's on our website. It's very specific. And if you don't fit that filter, you're not going to be a guest. You can pay us. That's our business model. And we'll interview you, not on a live show, but we'll create a video for you, same style and everything else. But unless you meet a very specific profile, which is a C-level exec from one of the largest organizations in the world, or an extremely well-known brand, or a smaller company, and you're doing something that is literally changing the world in some way. And I don't mean making up, we have the latest and greatest in XYZ enterprise software. And I'm not going to say AP, AR, finance, supply chain, whatever, business process software, all of which is crucially important to run the world, but that's not my focus. So you say no. And eventually I try to answer most of the emails, the serious emails that come in. It may take me 6 months, sometimes a year. I try to get back to them, at least send them a form reply. A lot of times I don't, they just fall through the cracks, and it's on my wish list of things that I wish I could do. But I don't want to hire 2 admins to go through the rejections.
I love what you're saying, where everything's free time and you're doing stuff that you want. My friend Mari Smith, she told me, because I was complaining one time about how I had 8 meetings in one day, which is what a lot of middle managers will say is a measure of their busyness. And she said, Dennis, what I do is I look at my calendar, and if the meeting's not hell yes, I don't attend it. So that way, whenever I wake up in the morning, I look at my calendar, every single meeting on my calendar is a hell yes meeting. I'm excited to be with. So when you have that kind of control of your time, like you and I do, instead of being like an employee somewhere, nothing wrong with that, then life is joyful, because every meeting, I was looking forward to meeting you. This whole week, I was looking at my calendar thinking, when am I hanging out with Michael? When am I hanging out with Michael?
Yeah. I'm the same way when it, like I was describing earlier, when it comes to travel.
Yeah.
If it's not a hell yes, I don't go. But when I started doing this, it was much harder. As you do something, it becomes easier. It was when I started doing this 10 years ago, I had this idea. I thought, this video thing, I might be too late at it, but I think nobody else is doing a video interview show live. And this would be fun. And literally I was thinking at the time, but it might be too late to do it. And that was one thing. And it was really hard to convince people to show up, to convince executives to show up and do it live, because it was so new. Now, having a huge track record, it becomes much, much easier. And so that the nature of the challenge shifts from proving credibility, which is what you have at the beginning in order to attract your first guests. You start by, asking the people and we talked about that a little bit earlier. to now filtering. But of course, there's always more well-known guests. So the challenge never goes away, right? It's like, I'd love to get the president of the United States, but that's not going to happen. So you're always trying to move up market in one way and expand in one way or another. That's just the nature of who we are as people and what we do.
Is there someone in my network that potentially would be one of these guests that you would like to meet that I could introduce you to?
Oh, I'll have to give that one some thought.
My network is your network, right? Mi casa is su casa. Anything I could do for you, Michael, just count me in. I'm a big fan. I count it a huge blessing to be able to spend time with you, and just whether it's on the podcast or even us having phone calls, I've learned so much from you. And my hope is that everyone in my community can learn, whether they're a virtual assistant just getting started in Pakistan, or maybe they're a business leader and they're running their garage door company in Phoenix, that everyone can learn from you, that even if they don't want to be a public face, but because they want to grow their business, because they want to help other people and they want to share their knowledge, they can learn a lot from your techniques, especially across social media. Yeah, especially about the biggest thing I noticed with you is your EQ, because working with C-level executives, you've got to be able to read between the lines. You have to be able to warm them up. You have to have a certain level of just executive panache that people can see through if you don't have. And I think just spending time listening to you, the words you're saying are great, right? Everything, all the advice you're saying is great. It's not like you're saying anything that has never been said on the internet before. But when I'm listening to you, Michael, and everyone else who's listening or watching, listen very carefully exactly to how he's speaking, exactly the way he's phrasing things, these nuances, because I think that is everything. I've learned so much from reading autobiographies, not biographies, but autobiographies in their words, watching videos of these people speaking their words. And I find it's subconsciously programming my brain to be able to think like them and thus be able to act like them. So being able to spend time with you, Michael, is getting me closer and closer to being able to channel Michael Krigsman when I'm interviewing other people. So I just wanted to thank you and let other people know what an honor and what a pleasure it is to be able to learn from you, and then how they can get the most value by being able to emulate other people like you.
Well, you're very kind. I mean, because that's how I feel about you, Dennis. But I just have to say one final thing, which is this: that EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, another way of saying it is just being honest. It's like when I talk to you right now, when I interview people, I don't have a hidden agenda. Like, it really is. My goal is to serve the audience. In this case, my goal is to serve you. You are the proxy for your audience who will listen to this. And I really, really, really mean it. It's not a show. It's not put on. And I think that you take that genuine attitude. There is this term servant leadership that's out there. Just being honest, being straightforward. You combine that with developing a track record so people can see, he is this way. He does want to do the best thing for me as an interviewee. And I've seen him do this before on a consistent basis. And so add that up, and it means that, I can let my guard down because this person has my back.
Yeah. It's trust and relationship building.
It really is at the end.
You've been so generous with your time, Michael. I wanted to ask you one last favor. If you can speak to the camera, introduce yourself and tell people why they need to listen to this episode of the Coach U Show. What are they going to learn?
I'm Michael Krigsman. I am the publisher and the host of CXOTalk. I have produced 800 episodes, interviews with top business leaders in the world. On this episode, Coach U asks me, frankly, the hard questions. He dives into how we do it from a technical standpoint, from an analytics standpoint, from the perspective of the deepest psychological reasons why. Just watch it. If you are interviewing people, you're doing video, and you want to learn how to do it, there's just a wealth of information. And Coach U has this magic way of drawing it out. So watch, and a huge thank you to Coach U.